from rescues and shelters. We work with both native and non-native species. And first off, I want to ask what you think an adaptation is. What does that word mean, adaptation? One definition is it is a tool or job that an animal uses to be able to survive. Now, does that mean that these animals are wandering around wearing tool belts? No. So these are tools that they may have as a part of their body to help them to find food, to stay safe, to raise a family, to make a shelter or find a shelter. And I have a couple of tools that you may have in your house. I have a pair of chopsticks. Now, how many of you use chopsticks? And I bet a lot of you do, and you're probably way better at it than I am at picking up food. But I want you to imagine these chopsticks are part of a bird's beak with a really long beak that's used to pick up food. What kind of bird can you think of that's found around here that has that long beak? I'll give you a clue. It also has long legs and wades in the water. Any ideas? How many of you said great blue heron? If you notice, he's got that long beak. He's caught a fish in this picture. And they're kind of that bluey gray look with those long legs. They're really fun to watch when they're flying or just walking around one of our park ponds. So they're really cool and graceful looking. They like to eat fish and frogs, crayfish. So take a look the next time you're out near a pond or stream and see if there may be a great blue heron flying over. So their beak is kind of like chopsticks. Well, another tool is a straw. Now, we use the straw to sip up our milk or water, but there's a bird that has a beak kind of like a straw. It's really long. They do use their tongue to help them to get their food, but they stick this straw-like beak down into bright, colorful, trumpet-shaped flowers. Can you think of what bird that might be? A clue for this bird is it flies really, really quickly, and it has the sound it makes with its wings in its name. It goes hum. Who's got an idea of who that is? Who said hummingbird? So one of the hummingbirds we have around here is the ruby-throated hummingbird. This is the male. And you can see his little tiny beak. And it's at that trumpet-shaped flower. So those are cool adaptation tools. And I want you to think about some tools that you may have around the house. Pliers, tweezers. What kind of bird beak might those represent? And today we're going to take a look at some other adaptations and see how those animals use them to help them to find food, stay safe, find shelter. And the first one I'm going to share with you is a reptile. What is a reptile covered with? Is it covered with feathers, with dry scales, with fur? Who said dry scales? So this animal, this reptile, is covered with dry scales. She has 4 legs and a long tail. Might have a couple of different answers for that one. So she is a kind of lizard. She's called a crested gecko, and I'm going to bring her over. And here she is. And right now she's showing off what she can do with those feet. She is hanging on to the side of the container. She has really special feet. And now she's walking across the bottom. But if I turn this, there we go. So she has awesome feet for climbing. She doesn't have sticky toe pads like a tree frog or suction cup toe pads like tree frogs. Her toe pads, if you look at your finger, look at your fingerprints. You can see the ridges that make the fingerprints. Well, if we look at her toe pad under a really strong microscope, we'd see that her ridges on her toe pads had ridges. And those ridges have ridges. And those ridges have ridges. So it's creating what's called a weak van der Waals force, or kind of like a static electricity. How many of you have rubbed a balloon on your hair or on your shirt and then stuck it to the wall? So it's kind of the same principle or idea. What's really cool is her tail also has that. Now I'm going to take her out so we can look at her just a little bit closer. But I wanted her to be able to show you how she climbs. Crested geckos are native to New Caledonia. And if you take a look at her, they're also called eyelash geckos. It looks like she's got eyelashes across her eye. And her eyes are huge. And you just saw her tongue stick out. So her tongue is used to help clean the lens and also to help pick up food. She has really big eyes. She's nocturnal, so she's active at night. And right now there's in that cat eye pupil, so the slit down. And that's because we're in a bright room right now. But as soon as it gets darker, her pupils will open up into a larger shape to allow her to see better at night. And you can get a look at her feet. Notice when she's moving on my hand, she's curling her toes backwards. They're also super good at jumping. So when she's curling her toes backwards, that's actually letting her move. The way her feet stick, she has to think about moving her fingers before moving her legs, or she's just going to stay in place, which is really cool. So she can sleep just by hanging with her fingers or even the tip of her tail. Because these guys are now found in the pet trade, they do come in a variety of colors. They will eat small insects and very ripe fruit and nectar. This one is a female, but the males are about the same size. Up until the mid-1990s, these guys were listed as extinct because no one had seen them for decades. And it was just by chance after a really huge tropical storm went through New Caledonia and folks went out to do a survey of the animals and plants that two different groups found small pockets of these guys. And no one really knew anything about them, so they took some out of the wild so they could be studied. So they're taken off the extinction list, but they are still very much endangered in their habitats due to habitat loss. And you see her tongue coming out. She's cleaning. So I'm going to put her back. And then we're going to move on to our next animal. Now the next animal that I'd like to share with you is a mammal. So what is the body covering for a mammal? It's not going to be scales like our crested gecko. Did anybody say hair or fur? So I do have a mammal that we're going to find his cousin out in our backyards. And he's about yay big. He's got 2 big ears and a very short tail. Who do you think that could be? Who said rabbit? So rabbit will be our next guest, and I'm going to get him and be right back. Hi, this is Ambassador Loki, one of our 3 rabbits that you might see during our programs. And he is not a wild rabbit. He is a domestic rabbit. And he does have the coloration of our wild rabbits in his ears and on his spots down his back. So just imagine if he was covered in these shades of brown all over his body, then he would be just like our eastern cottontails, although he is a little plumper than our wild rabbits. Now, eastern cottontails get their name because of their little white fluffy tail that looks like a fluffy cotton ball that somebody stuck on the back of them. And that is very important as a warning. How many of you have seen rabbits dashing down through the yard or down the driveway or in the park, and that tail is flashing and then all of a sudden it disappears because the rabbit has settled down into a hiding spot and now that white flash is gone. But if you take a look at rabbit, they've got some really cool adaptations. If you take a look at his ears, he's got pretty big ears for his head. Now, if you take your hands and make them into a C shape, and I can only do one because I'm holding the rabbit, make that C shape attached to the pinna of your ear. And this part is our pinna. Mammals get fancy ears. So our pinna helps to catch the sound to go down into our eardrum. But if you have bigger ears, you now have bigger ears to catch more sound with. Now imagine those ears on the top of your head, and they move around a little bit like a radar dish. You'd have ears of a rabbit. How many of you have ever tried sneaking up on a rabbit in your yard or in the park? No matter how much we try to be sneaky, 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 what does the rabbit do when we get too close? It hops or runs off. Our wild rabbits can go about 30 miles per hour for short distances. And they do that with these nice large feet. So he has a lot of potential energy waiting to become kinetic energy in a mighty jump. And if you take a look at his eyes, are his eyes facing forward like ours or more to the side of his head? So they're more to the side of the head, and I'm right behind him right now, but the way his eyes are positioned, he can actually see me right behind him, as well as pretty much everything else in the room. So that also adds to the really hard to sneak up on. Even though we think we're being really stealthy and sneaky, rabbit has already heard us and seen us before it reacts when we get too close. Now the rabbits in our neighborhood, they do get used to us. They get used to the regular everyday sounds in our yards, so they may not move as quick away from us, but they're never going to let us get too close. And if an animal is sick or injured, please find an adult to help, because the animals won't realize you're trying to help them, and you may accidentally get hurt too. But by you finding an adult, you are a wildlife warrior and helping them. Now, other adaptations is his fur coat. He's got a nice thick fur coat, and because it's getting warmer outside, he's actually molting or shedding right now, just like our pet cats and dogs do. But that thick fur coat is going to help protect him from briars and brambles as they're going through the undergrowth. And in the winter, they grow in a thick fur coat to help insulate during the cold days. Rabbits are active all year round. They're more crepuscular, meaning they're more active during the evening, early evening, and in the early morning, when it's kind of that twilight time where they can kind of blend in. Sometimes you may see them, especially in the spring, on overcast days, and they're taking advantage of it being a little cooler to come out and continue to eat before going in and hiding through the hot part of the day. So take a look for those rabbits in your neighborhoods. When you're looking at the rabbit, you see all the pretty colors they are, and you can go, hey, I see that rabbit sitting out in the middle of the green grass. But when they're looking at you, they're seeing shades of gray. So they don't see colors like we do. And if you make a noise, have you ever seen them freeze in place? They'd look as still as a rock. And that helps them hide from predators like hawks and foxes or owls, because those animals are also looking for movement and not color. Rabbits are herbivores, so they've got the nice sharp teeth in the front for biting their food, like apples that fall to the ground, grass, flowers, vegetables. Not so big on carrots because they can't pull up a carrot, but they do like the green carrot tops, but they don't really go for the the orange part. So I'm going to put him back. Notice he kind of bounced his head a little bit. He's trying to focus. Imagine you having your eyes on the side of your head. You would need to bob a little bit to help bring into focus what's around you. And that's what he was just doing right there. So now I'm going to put him back, and I challenge you to watch the rabbits in your neighborhood. Okay, so now that Ambassador Rabbit is away, I'd like to bring out our third ambassador. He's also a mammal. He's a nocturnal mammal, and he's North America's only marsupial. Who is that? Who said opossum? So Opossum is going to come out next. We're going to take a look at some of his features, talk about his adaptations, and hopefully he's going to eat some apple for us. So I'm going to go get him right now. Hi. So now I have our ambassador opossum. His name is Harvey. And notice he's using his nose to find the apple. And using his hands to grab the apple. There we go. He has about 60 teeth in his mouth, and they're all pointy and sharp. And he's showing you how well he can chew that apple up. But he used his nose first to find that apple, because they've got a great sense of smell. They have awesome hearing. And you might notice his ears look like they're drooping right now. That's the droop of happiness, because he's having one of his favorite treats. But they do have awesome hearing. They do not, however, see very well. So their eyesight is pretty poor. So they can see kind of close up, but if he was a person, he'd need glasses like me to see to get outside. Now when you look at his front feet look very much like our hands. But instead of rounded fingernails, they've got claws because they're awesome at climbing. And as a marsupial, the females would have a pouch and carry up to 13 baby joeys in that pouch. He's a boy, so he does not have the pouch. And he's also not a very quiet eater. And if you take a look, can I show your back foot? If you take a look at his back foot, oh, you're just walking. They have 5 as well on the back, and their big toe is a special thumb. Can you scoot backwards, buddy? There we go. He weighs about 12 pounds. So he's a pretty big boy. So their tail doesn't really have any fur on it. And a lot of people think these guys are like big rats, but they're not. They're not rodents. They're marsupials. When he was younger, this tail was prehensile and could wrap around a tree branch. It can still be used to pick up leaves to line a den. But as he's an older individual, he's about 3 years old now, he has more of a chubbier tail than a tail that can prehensile. I know. You like that. And they've got a thick fur coat. Reminds me a lot of like a German Shepherd, so they have the guard hairs on the top and then softer, fluffier fur on the bottom. They are really good at climbing. They do not sleep hanging upside down by their tail. That only happens in cartoons and movies. But if you were a young opossum and you were climbing a tree and you slipped and fell, wouldn't it be nice to have a 5th hand that just wrapped around a tree branch to keep you from falling to the ground? And also, when the babies come out of mom's pouch, they will hang on her back and wrap around and hang on with their tail on her fur so they don't fall off. And she'll show them what's good to eat, how to protect themselves, what their home area is. And opossums eat pretty much anything that they can catch or find. They're omnivores, meaning they like to eat both plants and meat. They are also one of nature's cleanup crew, So they will also eat dead stuff that they find. And even though he's an awesome lover of apples, if we eat an apple in the car, we should not throw the apple core out the window because that will attract animals close to the road, and that's when they may get hit by cars. But he is a really awesome animal with those really cool adaptations. And you didn't like your apple peel today, did you? So I hope you might see some of these guys out and about. Please don't approach them, but watch them. They're really cool to see. And they have some amazing adaptations. I'm going to put him back. And as I'm doing that, I'm first going to give you a clue. The last animal ambassador that I would like to share with you is a daytime or diurnal flyer. He's a bird that we might find outside flying up high in the sky, and his tail feathers are reddish. So this is our red-tailed hawk. If you take a look when I bring him around, you can see that reddish tail feathers. And when they're flying up in the sky, when the sun shines through, you can see that reddish color really well. If you take a look at his talons, these are what he's going to use to catch his food. And they're very sharp, which is why I'm also wearing a leather glove. If you take a look at his beak, he's got a very sharp, curved beak, so he can tear his food. So his beak and his talons are kind of like a knife and fork. If you take a look right over his eyes, it looks kind of like there's a black ridge. That is the same as when we put on a baseball cap. That ridge is going to help block the light from getting into his eyes so he can find his food during the day. The darker feathers under his eyes are like football players and baseball players. It helps to keep the light from bouncing into their eyes when they're trying to focus on getting a ball. So he has a wingspan of about 4 feet, and he can spot a rabbit about a mile away. So they've got super eyesight. That would be the same as if you went up to a 7-story building and you looked down and read a newspaper headlines. What would we need to see, or use rather, to be able to see far off and bring objects closer to us? Who said binoculars or a telescope? Those would be awesome to help us. And he likes to eat rabbit, snakes, squirrels, young groundhogs. Oh, and there's he's fluffing his feathers for you. And our ambassador red-tailed hawk, his name is Blizzard, and he is 21 years old. In the wild, they live to be about 7, based on banding studies. In captivity, they can live up to 25 years. We have him because he is blind in his left eye. When he was about a year old, he was blown into a car during a snowstorm. And fortunately, that did not break any bones, but it did cause some nerve damage for his eyes and his feet because he doesn't grip the way he should. Now, how much do you think he weighs? So he weighs 2 pounds or 8 sticks of butter. So why does he weigh so little but look so big? What kind of bones does he have? He's got hollow bones, and that's going to help him to give flight. Remember how I said he was lucky he didn't break any bones when he hit the car? Because often when birds hit things like cars, buildings, they break bones. So he was lucky in that respect. I hope you find some red-tailed hawks in your neighborhood flying or sitting on a fence post. We also have red-shouldered hawks in the area as well. And they're really fun to take a look at and watch and maybe be lucky to see them catch a meal. Other birds are going to have other cool adaptations to help them get around. I'm going to see if he'll open his wings for us a little bit. Sometimes he does, sometimes he doesn't. You don't want to today? Okay. So, take a look at when they're soaring, and they do have that 4-foot wingspan. So if he had his wings out, he would not be able to walk through a doorway with his wings spread out. So I'm going to put him back, and when I return, I'm going to transform one of our volunteers into some of the animals that we saw today with some of their cool adaptations. All right, so I have my son Griffin, who's also one of our volunteers here at Echoes of Nature, and today he's going to help me by dressing up in some of our costume pieces, and we are first going to transform him into a crested gecko. So, our crested gecko has the really large eyes with the nocturnal slits, and the hands that will let him grip onto the walls. Now imagine, my friends, if you had hands like this, you'd really drive your parents up the wall because they'd be chasing you all over the place. But with those big eyes and sticky hands. So this is our crested gecko. Now we're going to transform him into rabbit with the big ears so he can hear better. And maybe with the bigger ears he can hear the directions that he needs to do better. So, the next one is going to have the prehensile tail. So now, all right, Griffin, if you'll turn around for me, keep standing up. So now he has that prehensile tail of our opossum, but not to sleep hanging upside down in a tree. But maybe he would use it to collect leaves and pine needles to make his bed nice and soft. And our last animal that we're going to transform into will be our hawk. So, slide arms through those. Slide arms through those. And turn around and turn around with your wings out. There we go. So now he's got his wingspan and his tail so he can fly through the air. And if you turn back around, we're going to give him his talon feet. So, buddy, step on those. Now, he just needs a really big beak, and he's ready to go. And go hunt for a rabbit tonight, or a squirrel, or a snake. So, all right, we're going to take that off of you. Thank you, my volunteer, for helping me. And you can go have a seat for me. I want to thank everybody for joining us today for our amazing adaptations program. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you enjoyed seeing some of the animals. I challenge you to take a look at the animals around us and take a look and think about their adaptations. How do they move? Do they swim? Do they fly? Do they walk? Do they crawl? Do they jump? What are ways that they're going to get their food? Do they have a long beak? Do they have a short beak? Do they have sharp teeth? What are they doing to get that? How do they make their homes? Are they making their homes? Are they using somebody else's home? Kind of like a hotel? What are they doing? And I challenge you to check out the books with the libraries and find some really cool books on adaptations. And please remember that the animals I use today are very used to being seen and up close to humans. When you are observing wildlife, please don't get too close to them. Watch them. That way you're not scaring them and they don't feel threatened either. If you do find an injured animal, please find an adult so they can call the proper department so they can help that animal. And I thank y'all very much for joining us, and have an awesome summer. Thanks so much.
Excitement and adventure are around every corner this summer at your library. Create your own literary wonderland at home. Immerse yourself in our never-ending online library. Learn new skills, explore virtual events, and connect with your community in a whole new way. Starting May 18th, the Prince George's County Memorial